These established CCs, their reputation actually needs to be burned to the fucking ground. You cannot be taken seriously anymore. You don't deserve to be taken seriously anymore. What is this shit?
If there's one name you cannot escape right now in the Wuthering Waves community, it's Saintontas, aka Mr. Wuwa Ruined Blank. Love him or hate him, he makes good content, and that's the truth. And if you're a follower of Saintontas, you know what kind of content he has been dipping his toes into. And that is react content. And more often than not, he genuinely does try to actually review points and try to create a discussion. But there was one video where I, as a viewer, was straight up disappointed by how disingenuous he acted himself. Continuous strawman arguments and ad hominem, aka attacking a person's character rather than attacking their argument. And strawman arguments, aka attacking a point that was never in discussion. A classic example of this is saying, I like pancakes, and the strawman argument being, so why do you hate waffles? Why it doesn't work is because the discussion was never about waffles, it was about pancakes. A good way to discern strawman arguments is this saying, relevant to the topic, irrelevant to the argument. They are related to each other, but that's not the discussion. The discussion is about something else. This is about why I like pancakes and not about why I hate waffles, which I never even stated that I did, but I do like waffles. And clever strawman arguments are usually formed by twisting one word to make it as close as possible to the argument while not actually being a part of the discussion. And the reason why I am specifically going over this, as somebody that does make shorter videos and occasionally a drama video, is that the perception of what happened has completely shifted in a way that is completely unfair. Some of the biggest creators are completely on Saintontas' side, and I bet for a fact, with my life, that they did not watch the video. Because if you did, this is what you stand for. You should be cancelled for explaining the game in layman's. Do not make discussions about the game or theorize about how the game can go or how the game can improve, because the game does not have any problems in the team building aspect. I'm going to be going over his reaction to Vars' video, and I want to cover it because I refuse to believe that CCs like Tectone actually stands fully with what he said. I genuinely believe he did not watch the video. That it's the truth. Vars lied about the game. Vars' video was absolutely terrible, and it was controversial. If you are a pursuer of truth, you would have watched the video and see for yourself. Sure, there are some poorly worded arguments, but even so, it is clear that there's really nothing wrong with the video. It actually brings up some very good discussions that I think we actually should have about the game. And I'm gonna say it so it makes sense if you're a drama follower. Saintontas is doing the exact same thing he did with Gacha Smack, but this time, nobody has Vars' back. I am just some random fucker on the internet. I don't earn any money off this. My channel cannot even be monetized. I'm just a guy with a microphone who records in Audacity, puts it in my cracked 2020 Premiere, and play around with the funny adjustment layers and ultra keys. Then I just put it on the internet and watch people lose their shit just because I said, no, I don't think this is good about a video game, as they indirectly throw out all their life trauma in a YouTube comment. That's fucking great, isn't it? Now, why some people may or may not have taken Saintontas' side on this is probably because it's a lot about meta and convoluted things. It's hard to focus on the discussion about a bunch of things in the game, and I can see why people have just watched like 10 minutes of the video, he gets to the point, and then they may or may not watch a few other points, and then they just leave because it's way too convoluted. And that's the only way I can understand anybody siding with Saintontas, because if you watch the entire video, he is just having a fit. Simple arguments that are factual statements about the game, he just says, no, that is not true. And then he just argues for something else. And I am here to just fucking set the record straight so everyone can fucking understand what's happening. I haven't made wuwa guides, but I've made guides about other video games. I understand the importance of layman's and relatability in terms of convoluted mechanics in video games, and how to explain them so you can teach the fundamental understanding so they can apply it for themselves. And I have experienced myself when people did not want to fucking listen to me, until everyone realized I'm pretty okay. And people make mistakes. So what is the goal of my video? I want to prove that Saintontas has poorly represented Vars. And I also want to prove that Vars has made poorly formulated points while also pointing out factual truths about the game, and tries to get you to think how the game can evolve in the future. So keep this in mind, and I will obviously make a shit ton of jokes because this video was so fucking long, because if anything, I am getting angry by how fucking badly he is misrepresenting very simple to understand points. So without further ado, Let's start. And pro tip for the drama farmers, skip to part 3.
Include the 20% attack on her S6, but by and large, Sanhwa's entire existence is to just give an outro skill to Camellia.
So, Sanhwa's entire existence is to give an outro skill to Camellia.
The synergistic aspect of team building is primarily housed in one's outro skill. For example, Camellia's best partner is Sanhwa because Sanhwa gives a metric ton of basic attack deepen on her outro skill. You can make a case to include the 20% attack on her S6, but by and large, Sanhwa's entire existence is to just give an outro skill to Camellia.
Camellia's best partner is Sanhwa, alright? Okay, what's playing in the background? Camellia, and it's her best team. He says why Sanhwa is her best teammate.
But by and large, Sanhwa's entire existence is to just give an outro skill to Camellia.
Which is true. When you play Camellia with Sanhwa, all Sanhwa does is that she gets in, uses his ult, skill, forte, and just gets the fuck out and gives the outro.
An outro skill to Camellia. That is essentially the same exact thing as saying that Sanhwa cannot function without another character.
This is how you can tell where the strawman argument is starting. Because what he's trying to say is trying to point over towards what he could imply. And here's the problem. No, Vars was making a comment about how Sanhwa in a team only plays for the outro skill. In a team with Camellia, Sanhwa, and Shorekeeper, Sanhwa's only purpose in that team is to give the outro skill buff. And that is it, because she can't really do much else. And the idea is that she's kinda just there. She doesn't provide anything else. It's not really interesting, when you're probably able to do a lot more with a character like Sanhwa, especially with her design. So that is the point that Vars was trying to fucking make. This critique highlights character design that in return affects team building, unless you're trying to purposely misrepresent the argument here. Which, oh shit, you do.
That's what he's saying here.
That is not what he's saying, that's what you assumed he was saying. And he's pointing out some characters that have synergy in their outro, but not in their playstyles. And he even shows an example later. Saintontas himself literally went from saying he is implying this to this is what he's saying. And he starts going down the slippery slope from here.
That Sanhwa is reliant on another character to function. Listen to what he says right here.
You have characters working in concert with one another to achieve a collective goal greater.
He uses Honkai Star Rail as an example of good team building because there are characters that rely on each other's kits to function.
And now we have entered the strawman argument, because now we're arguing for something completely different. We're not arguing about how a character kit is very shallow with potential for a lot more depth, besides just giving a buff, and instead we're putting words in Vars' mouth. And I'll use my trusty Occam's razor for this one and simply just say the idea that Vars is trying to get across is that Sanhwa is boring and she could be more interesting. And boring team building is boring.
Where's the issue with this?
He's saying that there's an issue, then uses Honkai Star Rail as an example where there isn't an issue.
Issue is that compared to other gachas, where
Compared to other gachas,
you have characters working in concert with one another
you have characters who work with each other
to achieve a collective goal greater than the sum of their individual.
Greater than the sum of their individual parts. By him saying this statement essentially implies that in wuwa, you're not doing that.
So a lot of people might actually be on Said's side with this one. But let me add something called perspective. And I'll ask a question. Out of all the gachas you've ever played, do you think Wuthering Waves relies on team building? And do you think Wuthering Waves is a game that rewards you for team building? Let me elaborate. In the most literal sense, in a way, it does. But do you think it does more than other gachas? Do you think Wuthering Waves would benefit from more complementary gameplay mechanics within character kits that then rewards team building by building synergistically? Because right now in the game, there is not a lot of them. It might feel like there's a decent selection, but the issue here is that the selection that is there is basically a one-size-fits-all, or works well with a lot of different characters. wuwa has very active combat engines and combat mechanics, so why not build even more around them, or why not build around them for characters? Things that aren't just more damage, or more healing, or more grouping, or more stacking, whatever the fuck it is. And hopefully you can see by now, the point of Vars' video is literally to create discussion. Because this, at the end, becomes opinionated. You're allowed to think that wuwa is perfect in every single way, you do fucking you. But the thing is that if you're actively trying to shut down the discussion because you think the idea of wuwa being able to expand their game by introducing characters or mechanics that rely way more on the characters you're pairing together, I think That is another fucking problem we had with the Genshin community, where any sort of line of discussion was immediately shut down if it remotely involved a critique with how the overall game works.
But then he used Sanhua as an example, a character that sucks balls by herself and requires another teammate, you know, the sum of the parts, to get the full potential out of her.
So the problem with saying it in this way, and not only saying, you know, he did state what he meant with the team building, but you saying he implied something he never said is already a red flag. Because I feel like, did you just kind of repeat what Vars is saying and repeating why it's a problem? Because isn't it kind of weird that we have characters in the game that just only function this way and nothing else? Doesn't that affect the team building in any sort of way? Sanhua is only able to function in this way just because of the way her kit is designed. And that makes the team building with Sanhua very unengaging. And as you literally stated by yourself,
Sanhua is an example, a character that sucks balls by herself.
She only exists to do one thing, but that's just kinda boring. And that's the point that Vars is making, and it's literally as clear as day if you fucking think about it for 2 seconds. What Vars is getting at is that Sanhua has no other depth than her outro skill. The only other depth is that she smashes through the ice, but what does the ice walls even fucking do? They just do damage. Besides a buff, there's nothing that Sanhua brings to the table. So, do you see the point? But what is the difference? You're saying that he's contradicting himself.
There is a really interesting argument that he made himself that I believe contradicts what I just heard. So, Sanhua's entire existence is to give an outro skill to Camellia.
When the only way you can come to that conclusion is that if you fucking close your ears and decided to not fucking listen or try to understand the other perspective.
Parts, the impression I get from wuwa is that it's just mostly individual units.
It's mostly individual units. Even though we just used the example of Sanhua, whose only existence is to buff other characters.
Units being put together, purely for the sake of it being convenient to do so.
And also, listen to what Vars says, because he's literally stating this next point as a opinion and not a fact.
The impression I get from wuwa,
which you can agree or disagree with, but you don't want to try to understand what he is saying and why he feels that way. Now personally, I don't completely agree with Vars, but I can see where he's coming from. However, what you do instead is this.
Units being put together, purely for the sake of it being convenient to do so.
Another clear example. Don Jin, a character that's mainly played as a main DPS, has a outro skill that buffs Havoc damage deepen. And if you want to play Don Jin with Rover, specifically Havoc Rover, despite the fact that she has that Havoc damage deepen, she is better as the main DPS. But what's just stopping you from using any other character to just buff Dan Jin instead? And as a support, the only thing she does is, besides the buff, she just does a crap ton of damage. And there's nothing really else to it. And do you think there's any other way to add more to it where it only complements Wuthering Waves gameplay?
Not necessarily having actual synergistic plays.
Let me just add another notch on the tree. Characters don't have synergistic playstyles.
So you just decide to ignore his example. And what's even better is what happens afterwards.
Anytime there is one, it's only to fuel their main attacker, implying that really the only way to go about wuwa's team building is vertical investment, leaving very little, if any, incentive to go for horizontal investment.
You happen to get a lot more efficiency out of investing in your hypercarry character instead of your sub DPS characters.
I don't know about you, but I feel like this comment is so irrelevant.
Because hypercarry characters have a higher portion of the team's total damage. But the fact of the matter is that I don't know any game where this also isn't the exact same case. Like, this is like saying, oh guys, when you play the Jing Yuan team in Honkai Star Rail, or when you play the Arlecchino team in Genshin Impact, the most important thing is that Arlecchino is built.
He's literally just talking about how, in wuwa, the best synergies are with hypercarry teams. But he is saying implying from Vars, so you can say that's a minus point. But honestly speaking, from myself and my own experience, I do agree. And honestly, I do prefer that. But I do feel like there should be some sort of incentive to actually also horizontally invest. Vars just explains what vertical and horizontal investment is, which are generally known terms, and Saintontas makes fun of this fucking Shangli that does under 100k, and we basically get to this point.
Horizontal investment's all about character selection and planning. A well-designed gacha game ideally gives players the freedom to choose either or, and more crucially, rewards players for choosing either or. At the moment, there really is no incentive to horizontally invest in wuwa beyond getting the necessary teams to 30-30 clear tower.
There is no incentive to horizontally clear other than getting the necessary teams to 30 out of 30 the tower. And this is my conclusion. This is a self-inflicted issue. This is us manufacturing a problem ourselves because we didn't understand the mechanics of the game.
If you do not understand that this will be a problem later down the line, and you do not want to mention it, that is disingenuous. Because it is absolutely going to be a fucking problem if TOA is the only game mode after 3 fucking years. Because then there is no point to horizontally invest, i.e., why the fuck would you ever need to pull for a character? Why would you ever need to pull or build a certain character that does a certain playstyle if they don't have any purpose in the entire game and is just there because for fun? In quotations. Kinda sounds like a certain game that you like to talk badly about. On the short term of a gacha game, 90% of the time, the roster is going to be low, vertical investment is going to be better. However, over time, there's going to be more characters, and hopefully the game evolves over time, along with its characters, as well as the mechanics of the game. However, the thing about investment to begin with is that it's focused on progression. And if you don't give a reason for players to progress, they will stop playing your game, especially if it's a live service game. If not addressed, it will be an issue. And it will not be a made-up problem. It will be a problem that will manifest. So shut the fuck up. And don't say things are made up when they clearly are problems that can manifest. This is literally glossing over a potential issue with the game in the future. And if you don't want to address that it can be an issue in the game because you don't like to discuss the possibility or something like that, I don't fucking know why you wouldn't want to discuss this, but for some reason you don't. What about pincer maneuver? It's like, it's gonna be... If pincer maneuver gets permanently added into the game, it's the worst game mode and the most fucking boring one because it's literally fucking Spiral Abyss with the TOA twist that you don't fucking reset through floors. It is literally a closer copy to Spiral Abyss than TOA. And I will be honest, I would much rather have anything else. Pincer maneuver is fucking mid as shit. But you get to choose the buff. Wow, that's great. I get to choose how my clear is faster. Anyways, moving on.
There's no central mechanics or combat engines. And so my point to that is, does he know what concerto energy is?
Yes, he does, because that's literally how he started one of his arguments.
The synergistic aspect of team building is primarily housed in one's outro skill.
If he doesn't know what concerto energy is, he wouldn't fucking know what an outro skill is. Because how the fuck do you know how an outro skill works if you don't know how to get it? This is just disingenuous fucking framing. And he's especially taking advantage of how poorly he worded it, because it's pretty fucking clear what Vars is trying to say here. He's trying to point out that Wuthering Waves doesn't really have a combat engine in the game that isn't just concerto energy, and there isn't a single other combat engine in the game that can drive team building and drive gameplay variety. And I agree. I play this game, and all my general gameplay footage is my own. I genuinely do believe that Wuthering Waves could greatly benefit off another layer, because right now, outro skills kinda feel like elements for Genshin, in the sense that if they don't match, then good luck. And besides other fucking synergies like, for example, for Jinsei, and how she gets the most damage, you're gonna have to rely on other ways to get teams working, and I think he actually brings a good point. Especially if Kuro continues to just focus on outro skills only in terms of variety for team building.
And around things like type matchups.
The game isn't designed around type matchups. We have outro skills that buff only one attribute and then buff a secondary damage type. This means that there is a focus on pairing types together.
Pairing types together versus type matchups are not the same. Your counterpoint is literally the thing he is criticizing. The fact that your only source of type matchups is things that you control within your own team and not the opposition. Besides, if it's the same type or not, i.e. are you going to do normal amounts of damage or less damage? And that is the only depth. And that is the thing he is criticizing. And I think Wuthering Waves can do something interesting that isn't just copying Genshin in terms of the elements. And Wuthering Waves should find an elemental mechanic that fits their gameplay mechanics and their gameplay engines. Say, if you basically match two elements together, you can get a benefit like you break the stagger bar more. Just some random ass thought. That's what I mean. It should fit Wuthering Waves and not just copy Genshin. It should be implemented in a way that fits their game and not Genshin. That's what I want to say.
Or battle mechanics.
There's no battle mechanics. Again, what the fuck is vibration strength and a stagger bar? What this means is that if you don't use the stagger bar, you don't use vibration strength reduction, you don't knock the fallacy out of the sky when it activates the jets and goes sicko mode, you will have an awful time. And this begs the question for me, the follow-up. Has he actually fought the fallacy in the tower a single time? So that's my follow-up point. Because one fight against the fallacy would kind of force you to recognize the value of the stagger bar and its reduction. And so we are again implying that there was something wrong with Kuro's design decisions, that they didn't think about these things, that that they didn't keep these top of mind when designing the game, and basically making them look like developers that kind of don't know how to do their job.
Just like the matchups, he's talking about how there could be more combat engines, and how there's practically nothing else. But I will actually side with Saint a little bit more here, because there are more characters in the game that can be built around the stagger bar, because there's characters with really fast concerto energy regen, so you can basically just spam intro skills, looking at S2 Rowena right here. So besides the fallacy of no return, is there any other boss that really forces you to stagger them? Like, really forces you? Not really, but I'm glad that Kuro is actually making more enemies like that. But Saintontas, you're literally just sitting here, glorbing, sucking the fattest dick, the most amount of dick. Okay, excuse me. Just gonna be honest, this is incredibly disingenuous to imply that he is saying this and that he thinks this. Because literally, it is your interpretation, and you're not trying to find out if there's any other way to see it. Again, you're just turning it into attack on Vars, which whether or not you agree or disagree right here, it's still very fucking toxic to just assume that he wants to attack your game.
And we're sponsored by Kuro to make videos for the game while doing this to the devs, making them look incapable? How much worse does this get?
Maybe it's because his videos aren't bad, and this video is actually not a slanderous video, it's just a normal video, but you can't take it any other way. Maybe just a thought.
On one end, Wuthering Waves inadvertently is one of the most free-to-play friendly gachas of its kind in that you're not pressured to pull for a ton of characters. You just need 3 attackers, 3 backups, and 3 healers, and you're good to go. It's not like in Genshin where you gotta think about all these elemental reactions, or Starl where you have to think about all the various combat engines and gimmicks, or Blue Archive where you have to think about blue units, red units, yellow units, I hear they have purple units now, frontline, backline, all that stuff. In wuwa, you could just pick a character, give them gear, get them a partner with a natural skill or buff that helps them out, and then just get good at dodging and parrying.
Why are we just reducing wuwa's gameplay like this? Why are we just reducing wuwa's gameplay like this?
Because Saint, I'm sorry, just like the other games he's talking about, wuwa is actually quite simple. However, are there more depths to the fundamental mechanics? Sure. Everything that Vars said is true. You just need to get good at your character, get good at dodging, pair them up with good enough teammates that synergize just enough, and boom, you clear the game. There is nothing else more to it. And if you find offense to that, I am sorry. If you cannot handle explanations about wuwa in layman's, I don't even know what to say. This sort of behavior is fucking pathetic.
How we're reducing the gameplay.
Character, give them gear, get them a partner with a natural skill.
But you don't need to do that. If you just have a dual DPS team, you can play Zhang Liao and Encore together, and it works. It's good, it's strong. You can do that. He doesn't even list the possibility of it.
Alright, so tell me what the fucking point of this argument is. This is by definition a counterpoint that is related to the topic, but irrelevant to the argument. Dual DPS in the game, besides doing just more damage, has no fucking purpose besides personal preference. The game does not incentivize you to play dual DPS in any sort of way other than the fact that it's a fun playstyle. Because I can literally just go here and say the exact same thing that Vars did. You can basically just get a dual DPS team, learn their combos, learn their rotations, and boom, I cleared a game. That is the depth that you wanted to add to the conversation. And you're using it in a way to basically discredit him, while your point is literally just the same as if it were with a hypercarry team. The gameplay experience is slightly different, but the overall outcome of these two is literally the same. You clear the content. And if you can't handle somebody reducing your precious game, I'm sorry, that is unironically a you problem. I can't fucking tell the difference between this and this.
This is actually just a tourist video. I hate using the term because it is like insulting and degrading towards a CC.
Then don't call him a tourist.
It basically tells them that they aren't putting enough effort into actually learning the game before trying to make content about it. But that is literally what is happening in this video. Unless like the entire thing is like a bait and switch and he's just like, oh, just kidding guys, disregard everything I said for the past 13 minutes. Unless he does that, This guy is a fucking tourist.
So if he doesn't turn around and basically say that wuwa is actually way better than I made it out to be, then he is a tourist. That sounds kinda fucking crazy when you put it in that way, and extremely unfair, don't you think?
It's great if you're the type of player with a preference for that kind of gameplay, but fundamentally, it conflicts with what a gacha game is about. A bunch of different characters to account for a bunch of different scenarios. The biggest area where the lack of party building and strategy hurts the most would be in character selection. In all honesty, the 6 elements mean virtually nothing at the moment. There may be bosses who resist a certain elemental type, but that's the most rudimentary system you have for typing.
Okay, so we're just gonna say it's like it's rudimentary and bad, even though we just said there's no typing at all in the game, and now we're gonna say there is typing.
Yes, the fucking elemental system in wuwa is incredibly rudimentary, and he said it virtually serves no purpose, besides just nerfing a straight up 1v1 matchup, which is objectively true. That and the fact that there's no reason to pair certain types together because the game doesn't even incentivize you to do so. And there's literally no benefit from doing it, besides the fact if a character has a good outro skill, and the elements just kinda sit there and there's nothing else to do with them, besides the fact that they're there to nerf you if you're against an enemy of the same type. That is Vars' critique, and I think it's a very fair one, because I do believe that Wuthering Waves has the depth for the combat mechanics to provide another formula. Kuro games do not create a problem and sell a solution, they give you a problem for you to solve. But it feels like we're given a math problem with only one formula to actually solve it. And if they gave us another formula, well, then we would probably understand that math problem a little bit more and be able to create our own solutions. That's what I'm trying to say. The current combat mechanics are great. Why not play into them with other aspects of the game that aren't developed? And that's the point he's making. Any questions?
So being simple and not requiring a fucking PhD in elemental ICDs to fucking understand the rotations in Genshin. It's just bad that we don't have that in this fucking game.
Nobody was fucking saying that. This is just a fucking schizophrenic episode, because he's hearing voices and he's hearing things. I don't know what those things are, but all I can think of is that this guy thinks that Vars is possessed by some fucking Genshin demon to make this video, to haunt Wuthering Waves, to ruin the reputation, and do as much misrepresentation as possible. That's literally the only explanation I have for him going so hard at literally just a discussion starter. He literally can never tackle the point directly and always needs to go after it from a different angle, all the fucking time.
Along with, I suppose, the Echo Set bonus, there's no reward for going a Mono Glacial or Mono Fusion or Mono...
Why does there need to be one? Why are we saying this is bad?
Get people to start discussing, and nobody was calling this shit bad. It works, but it's not fucking interesting. You can call out simplicity and not make it sound bad. Let me ask you this instead. Do you think that there's a way to implement elemental play in Wuthering Waves that would benefit the game? And if so, why not talk about it? The elemental system in wuwa works. But guess what? I think it's boring as fuck, and I wish the elements meant a little bit more rather than just what type of damage I do. I thought that game was going that route when I looked at the fucking bonuses on the echoes. I thought Havoc was gonna be basic attack focused. I thought Arrow was supposed to be heavy damage focused. You name it.
Guys, because Vars doesn't play the fucking game, I guess I'll bring up the examples for you. You have your healer Baija over here, right? She's been in the game since 1.0, ladies and gentlemen. Wow, we do have Mono Glacial support, but we just say it's not there either.
There is no reward for going Mono Glacial. And what did you say?
Wow, we do have Mono Glacial support.
He was talking about how the game presents no benefit for playing around the elements. But you twisted it to the game doesn't have any support around the elements, which it clearly does. But that support in itself is only more damage and more multipliers. What kind of fucking bullshit example is that?
Guys, this is where it is. This is the definition we all need to know. Hanlon's fucking razor. A philosophical principle that suggests the people's actions are more likely to be explained by incompetence or carelessness than bad intentions. And saying that Mono Glacial has no support isn't a perfect example of this.
And again, he never said that Mono Glacial never had support. He said that the game mechanics themselves, not fucking characters, promote using Mono Glacial. There's a big fucking difference. There is no direct incentive for the game, besides if you have an SX Baija, to play Mono Glacial because the game does not promote team building that revolves around the elements. And do you want to discuss whether or not you think you can implement a system like that would make the game more interesting while not fucking copying Genshin? Holy shit, how many times does it have to be said? And also, if you're gonna make the point, oh, if you make an elemental system, you're copying Genshin. Oh. Okay, so like, you know, Genshin copied Pokemon, by the way, just saying.
Many combat engines in the game.
We're just gonna say that, and we're gonna use that to create points and create critiques that don't fucking exist. That is the meta of this video.
Yeah, there's absolutely nothing that can be improved at all. The game in the combat aspect is completely perfect, and these critiques obviously don't fucking exist. And there's nothing more, because Wuthering Waves has found out how to basically make the perfect combat game, and there's nothing you can question, cause if you do, you're an idiot. Yeah, fucking right.
Everything in here is just wrong.
That is objectively an untrue statement.
Prior to Shorekeeper, it became a meme that Verena was guaranteed to be in every single party for no reason besides being the best healer. Pragmatic.
Do we just make shit for fun?
Come the fuck on, Saintontas. You know what he fucking means. Are you gonna be this fucking stupid? Because he doesn't fucking mention every single small detail that he so apparently leaves out, and that way it fucking misrepresents how wuwa works as a fucking game? Holy shit. I bet you fucking get mad if somebody explains quantum mechanics to you because they didn't show all the fucking complex formulas you don't fucking understand unless you do quantum mechanics yourself.
Practically speaking, there's not a single reason for you to choose Baiju if Verena is available. Past healers, characters who specialize in a certain gimmick, namely supportive ones, have been knocked down in relevance for being either too disruptive to the carrier's actual attacks or simply not dealing enough damage. Take Qianxin for example, she's an excellent character who can do a ton of things, from shielding to healing to AoE damage to crowd control.
Why are we talking about character kits? Please don't fucking talk anymore about character kits.
The video is literally about team building. What do you do in team building? You fucking want me to explain chess without explaining chess? Like, what are you trying to get at? How can you not talk about characters when characters are literally the essential part of team building, for fuck's sake? And he makes a good point too. I love Jensen, but like, she literally does not fit into that many teams. And her forte can't be used off-field. But if you have a brain, you would know that Jensen's forte off-field would be broken as fuck. Permanent shield and basically permanent uptime at S2. Permanent fucking outro skills. How can you not mention that things like that play into her kit and her viability?
Plus on the side, but because she's not a dedicated buffer and healer while also not being a DPS unit, she has trouble finding a good spot in the meta. That's one downside to having universal defensive mechanics like parrying and dodging.
Did he just use whatever he just did to make a point that parrying and dodging is bad?
Now let me speak out. Vars has a point, but he completely fucked up the order. If you talked about Jensen before you talked about the parrying, his point would make a little bit more sense. Let me just play the clip a little bit more.
Downside to having universal defensive mechanics like parrying and dodging. It kinda shuts down any practical reason to make a tank support or any ancillary class.
Which makes a bit more sense, but I think the point generally does present itself as a bit weak, because the problem here, I feel like, is more or less about the overall character's design. So if a character inherently gets limited by the fact that their kit doesn't synergize as well with the core mechanics, a character is going to be worse and feel less synergistic in a lot of different teams. However, I don't necessarily think that parrying is like a part of it, the problem. But I do see the idea that characters simply just aren't as good because they're not able to parry, or they don't really need to be there because the concepts of parries diminish the need for defense. Because that's just how wuwa works as a game. And now, the moment that you've been waiting for. The clip I used at the start of this video, and the clip that I genuinely want to lead into with a bit of pre-app. This clip right here is bad no matter the context. Because unless you don't have a brain and you're fucking retarded, you will know that blindly standing by what Saintontas is saying is terrible and incredibly toxic. Especially when you can just use your brain for 2 seconds. And now, personally, this is just what I want. Saintontas, he can do whatever the fuck he wants. But if he were to watch this video, I would genuinely suggest that he just completely retracts this statement. Because the clip I'm about to show you, Vars is literally stating a fact, and Saintontas decides to respond with this. Roll it.
What I'm mostly concerned about regarding the current state of Wuthering Waves is that even though there's a lot of experiential distinction between characters, there's not enough practical distinction between characters.
If the biggest content creators for Wuthering Waves on launch were creators like Fob or Vars, who genuinely thought this about the kits of Jinxie and Chang Li, it is clear why there was not a lot of good content for this fucking game when it released. Because if this is how the CCs are thinking about the fucking game, these established CCs, their reputation actually needs to be burned to the fucking ground. You cannot be taken seriously anymore. You don't deserve to be taken seriously anymore. What is this shit?
So, if you literally explain how Jinxie and Changli have fundamentally the same end goal in their kits, which is stacking coordinated attacks for a large hit, and for Changli, building stacks for a large hit, you apparently deserve to have your reputation burned to the ground because you explained wuwa's mechanics in layman's. No matter how you fucking twist it, Vars is literally correct in every single fucking way. If you listen to him, he iterates what he means too.
What I'm mostly concerned about regarding the current state of Wuthering Waves is that even though there's a lot of experiential distinction between characters, there's not enough practical distinction between characters.
There is experiential but not practical distinction, which through continuous gameplay loops, you will eventually feel. And no matter how I break it down, for Jinxie or Changli, it comes up the same. Changli's gameplay element and gameplay loop to provide the most damage from her kit is to basically try to build as many stacks as possible. You have different ways to obtain those stacks, completing your basic attack chain, using your skill, using your intro skill, and using your ultimate, which provides you with all 4 stacks. You want to get 4 stacks because at 4th stack, your forte gets a very strong attack that does a large hit of damage at the end and some nice tick damage along with it. And you can combo it with your ultimate by doing 3 consecutive big hits. Forte, into ult, into forte. But Chungli's way more than that. You could play quick swap. What are you trying to do in the end when you're playing Changli? Tell me, are you just basic attacking with every single rotation? No. Don't fucking be retarded. You know what Changli does? What is the goal of Changli's gameplay loop? If you cannot answer that question, either you're completely in denial or you're just retarded. The same goes for Jinxie. Get as many coordinated attacks in when you're doing your dragon form. And at the end, your goal is to get that full fucking bar filled up so you nuke the enemy with 400k plus damage. In the end, what are they working for? A big hit. But they get there in different ways. And that is exactly what Vars is fucking saying. And in return, you think he should not be taken seriously, have him and for some reason Fob's reputation be completely burnt down because they bothered to actually explain the characters in layman's for a large audience to understand. And in your head, that is a problem. Apparently. This is what I mean. If you genuinely think that Saintontas is doing nothing wrong here, I am going to tell you as it is. You are no different from the people that were fanboying Atsu and Enviosity, because they blindly stand behind what they say. Because if you think for yourself, and not for him, you will realize how bad this is. And don't worry, we aren't even done, because he hasn't even presented his worst take about the game that any of his viewer with a single brain cell could agree with is a terrible take from Saintontas. But what he does is frame it as if Vars is being an idiot. But next up, we have fucking Saintontas interpreting Vars as if he's blaming the devs.
Incentivize team building and planning, leading to the possibility that every unit gets compared to every unit. If it
So we're just gonna blame the fucking devs.
Now I'm pausing it here even though I want him to keep going, but I have to bring up the chapter of the YouTube video itself. And this could be a nothing burger because you know, you can have channel managers. I just thought it was interesting because just see it for yourself. Blaming the devs for power creep. Like, so what? Kernil, so what? Stop. So, here's the thing. No matter how you twist it, it is literally impossible to blame anyone else but Kuro Games for the power creep in Wuthering Waves, because guess what? They are the developers. I don't know if he even wrote this himself, because it could be a channel manager. But if there's one thing it highlights, it is how much corporate fucking cock. His fanbase loves to suck and is literally the fucking same as the Hoyo shills. It is unironically so fucking bad. Because if there's power creep in Wuthering Waves in the future, which is guaranteed by the way, no matter how you look at it, I am sorry, if you cannot comprehend that, or you think that's a bad point, you're a fucking retard. We are fucking playing gacha games over here. Get a grip. Just like taxes in real life, power creep in a gacha game is inevitable. And who makes the characters that are power creeping older characters? It's the developers! How? How do you not see that? How?
Oh, you didn't add enough practical distinction, and so all of the units seem homogenous and have the exact same playstyle, and then all we do is just compare the units in terms of the damage they do.
You can make countless experiential differences in the playstyle, but how many characters would it take to create different playstyles with the same end goal before the game gets boring? Despite the fact there's differences in one area, they're all gonna be the same in the end. And they'll all feel like they mush together, leading to the possibility that we just compare every single character in the game. Because they all feel the same. And the only distinguishing factor is personal play, which is limited, in the sense that you can master a character. But if the game can't provide different ways to play them, the game will feel boring. And if every new character feels the same, it will just be boring.
Comes out even if they have a unique aspect to them because there's no infrastructure in place for that.
We're already shit-talking 2.0?
He's literally just giving an example and explaining his points of what it could be like in the future if you do not address the problem that Vars is presenting. But for some reason, you're literally just twisting it into the fact that he's just trying to talk shit about the game. If you fucking listen to the video, Vars is presenting a perfectly fine point, and a point that was heavily accepted in Genshin Impact. And as somebody that played Genshin Impact for 4 years as well, and somebody that's played since day one of Wuthering Waves every single goddamn fucking day, wuwa is just as susceptible to the same problem, just in a slightly different way.
Leveled against the rest of the cast.
Let's just manufacture problems, guys. Let's manufacture problems and a solution based off the idea that Chang, Li, and Jinxie play the same, or like are the same character with no practical distinctions. And let's make further arguments and points based off of that horrifyingly bad conclusion.
Now, if you're this far in the video, you can probably tell that Saintontas pretty much came to this conclusion on his own because he does not listen. Like, this guy is so caught up in his emotions about this too. And you can say that I'm the same, but I am more mad that this guy is somehow fucking like 6 years older than me. I am actually listening to a fucking 12-year-old right now. And if you've also made it this far into the video, you probably understand how fucking bad he actually represented Vars in this entire video. He has misinterpreted nearly every single goddamn fucking point in this video. And he does not want to try to understand the other perspective. He was literally caught up on a Zhang Liao doing less than 100k. Like, who the fuck cares?
My theory for why Kuro is not producing that many characters compared to other gachas is unlike in other games where they have to in order.
Now we're shit-talking the devs!
Quick reminder that he probably retracts his point, cause Vars is not even remotely shit-talking the devs, and there's even a cut in the video that's quite clear and very noticeable, so he either went on a schizophrenic rant talking about something that was clearly a problem but decides to not make it a problem, or he just simply says, yeah sure, that is a fair take. But it's pretty funny how it's not in the video. But it also could be, I don't know, fucking EO rating him because he's in the chat after the cut. And I can't answer that question, so I'm not gonna dwell much longer on it. But just a reminder that it's there.
To give all formats enough units for a place to start working on, wuwa doesn't really have that. And be conservative with releasing characters, lest that would power creep the game really fast.
Bro saw the Jian rotation from 1.0 and decided he was trash.
I don't know where in the video Vars said specifically that Jian was trash. Maybe he said it in a guide. I wouldn't put money on that. But his point is literally about the fact that wuwa does not have enough endgame content to release a bunch of characters. Because if they were to literally go for 2 more patches in version 1 and release like, I don't know, something crazy like fucking 6 or 5 characters, that would power creep the game really fast. Because there is not enough endgame content in Wuthering Waves to suffice for that many characters. And he has even stated so many goddamn fucking times that this is the current problem with the current state of Wuthering Waves. But you can't fucking hear that because you're too busy indulging yourself with your headcanon about Vars being a fucking Genshin psyop or some shit. Either that, or you need some hearing aids. Cause unlike your gods amongst men that are your devs, you can't listen. Maybe that's why you look up to them.
And hey, let's just say he's power crept. Even though, Jian, when you use his 8 Qinglong rotation.
If you use the A24 fucking M16 assault rifle rotation, you'll get more damage. Insane. How about I just play a character that's easier to get going and feels more comfortable to play? Crazy thought.
Camellia just came out, right? Though she's the only 5-star Havoc unit in the game, people aren't comparing her to just Danshin and Havoc Rover. They're also comparing her against Changli, Shangli Yao, Encore, Jian, and
The only 5-star character that Camellia should be compared to in terms of power creep is Encore.
Why specifically? Camellia does so much damage, she nearly outperforms fucking Encore without teammates. And with one teammate, she completely obliterates the entire game, whether it be Sanhua or Shorekeeper. She can fucking duo nearly everything. And speaking of how this game works, I can fucking play Sanhua and Changli together and make it work, despite the fact that they're not synergistic. But she has so much concerto energy regen, I could just use her for an intro skill and do more damage than Encore. And I could do more damage than Encore with like literally every other DPS I've leveled up on my account. So, tell us why.
Because they share the same biz support.
Okay, alright, let's let him cook.
That is the only character Camellia should be getting compared to from the power creep angle. Because Encore also wants Sanhua. That is the only comparison that should be being made from the power creep angle.
Okay, let's let him cook. Okay, let's see.
comparing her against Changli, Shangli Yao, Encore,
What are we fucking doing? What are we fucking doing here?
to just Danshin and Havoc Rover. They're also comparing her against Changli.
No, you don't do that. You don't compare these two characters in the role they play on the fucking team.
Shangli Yao,
This guy does liberation damage. She does basic.
And the kitchen is fucking burnt to a crisp. Now, here is the problem with this. If you watched Vars' video, you understand why this is such a fucking shit take. Because these damage types are irrelevant. Basic, heavy, skill, and ult are all damage types that are just there to describe what type of damage they do within their kits. And there is no game mechanic that actively incentivizes you into using these specific damage types in the combat scenario, and vice versa. The only thing they're used for is just to describe how they scale in their stats. Let me also elaborate. Because of this, damage output literally overshadows this in every single way. Who is better? Encore or Changli? Well, if you know how to play Changli, Changli is better. But according to Saintontas, that is not a fair comparison because Changli is based off skill damage? What kind of fucking arbitrary measurement is that when the entire game, out of all the characters, have all focused on damage output and not elements like we've already established earlier? Just like damage types, it doesn't affect anything besides what element you're against, because there's no enemy in the game that takes less basic attack damage, less heavy attack damage, less skilled damage, and less ultimate damage. In this game, consistent DPS output is always on top. If you just do a shit ton of damage, it does not matter what element you are. That's how this game works. This argument is so fucking non-existent, it is standing on invisible table legs. Camellia power creeps every character except Jinxie, who is arguably on the same level, just because her damage output is so high. She is better than Jian, she's better than Zhang Liao, and she's better than Changli, because she literally just does so much more damage compared to them. And the same argument goes for Jinxie. She just does so much more damage because guess what, Saintontas? If you were using your brain, you would realize the concept of this power creep in your head doesn't exist. The only reason why you were able to think this way, because the most quote-unquote direct power creep was Calcharo with Zhang Liao, because Zhang Liao is easier to use, has more accessible damage, and higher numbers. At the end of the day, it literally does not matter that they do damage the same way. The reason why he power crept was because he plays better. For the majority of people, a lot of people would prefer playing Zhang Liao over Calcharo because Calcharo is way harder to pilot. And the effort versus reward you get out of Calcharo is way harder to get. Despite the fact that there's, you know, specific characters that buff specific damage types, there's nothing else to it. It's an end-all be-all. This comparison you're making between Camellia and Encore is pointless in the end, because there's already better characters in the game than Encore, and they are better because they do more damage. And Encore's purpose in the meta will be less and less just because she does less damage. And there isn't a way for Encore to stay relevant because she's always going to do less damage. And you can talk about dual DPS, but what will happen in the future? That's right. She will be replaced there too eventually. And she will be replaced because she does not do enough damage and has nothing else she can provide but damage. Because Encore as a character and every other character in the game can only provide damage, and their weapon and their element is completely irrelevant in the end. Because it's all about who does more damage. Because there's no external combat engines that drive any sort of power creep that isn't just higher damage in the game of Wuthering Waves. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, the argument has come full circle, and Vars has presented a valid criticism. The worst take that Saintontas has made, because he made a counter-argument to Vars' point that he thinks is stupid, but unintentionally proves Vars' own point that he calls a terrible take. How fucking ironic, isn't it?
The next DPS unit will also be compared against everyone else, regardless of their element.
What game do you not compare the DPS characters just from like an overall damage perspective? In what game do you not do that? Why are we just highlighting this issue as some unfortunate byproduct of incompetent devs when there is quite literally damage?
So, if you do not understand the problem, that is the only way you can compare characters in Wuthering Waves essentially, I think you're very blind to criticism. Because in wuwa, it is way more about the characters and how you play them. And now, believe it or not, I'm actually gonna be a little bit more against Vars here for this next section.
A backup dancer unit will instantly be compared to every existing backup dancer unit.
Is he just trying to make a point about characters in the same role being compared to? Why are we spending time on this? What point are we trying to fucking make here?
Compared to every existing backup dancer unit. Every supporter healer will instantly be compared to every existing.
What is wrong with this?
Here, I absolutely agree with Saintontas. These points are kind of like the points that fucking Saintontas made earlier. Mainly because Vars was talking about DPS characters before, and it doesn't really work when you categorize these characters. Because you spent like so much time arguing for DPSs, you can't use the same argument for these. That's how it feels. This point feels really incomplete, and I think that's why there's more to it that Vars just failed to elaborate on completely. A swing and a miss.
Also make units feel generic.
Did we just put up a photo of Zhang Liao for the only DPS with a time slow? He literally slows down time 4 times in his rotation.
He's just doing the same shit again. This was not like, it's not the fuck's sake. It's the same fucking shit-talking 2.0 kind of vibes.
Oh, she's another generic healer.
How does this video just get actively worse and worse with every passing second? The healer whose buffs cannot be activated without chaining together intro skills is—
Do I really have to explain? Simple comprehension skills. If you listen to the— oh, right. Oh, yeah. Because if you don't listen to the video, right? So that's why you think that this is what he's saying. It doesn't matter what he said. It only matters what you think he said. What a super fucking healthy mindset. If you couldn't tell, God, can this video be done?
He's the first glacial support. She's the first arrow driver. What have you? Characters are what makes a gacha game memorable and enjoyable. Not just in terms of personality, appearance, and background, but also their place in the meta. In wuwa, it's less about the characters and more about how good you are at dodging, parrying, and understanding timings. Nothing wrong with that, but it takes away focus from the character.
I feel like I don't even need to give commentary about this. Did we just show a picture of Zhao spamming plunge for 5 seconds and then just try to make that seem good?
I guess I do have to fucking clarify what he means. Because he's literally explaining how it will be in the future if you don't address this problem. Oh, guess that's another character. Oh, guess that's another one. Oh, like, sometimes he actually takes things way too literally. I have autism. I'm diagnosed. And I don't even take things that literally.
Over-engaging, for instance, people love Zhongli despite having fallen off considerably in the meta as a result of the history he had in the meta of making life easy for you. He was
Let's keep going.
Now what's really funny is that in the future we'll say the same thing about other characters that are in the game right now. But because he makes an example of a gacha game that's been out for a long time, where his argument is applicable, Genshin Impact, he just gets like depressed.
But I have a hard time finding a clear definition for characters in wuwa.
Because you have spent about 5 minutes of your time over those 6 months actually looking at the character kits. That is why. You are saying the most brain-dead, brain-rotted takes I have ever heard in my fucking life.
So if this guy is not going to offer us a proper conversation, I'll add it. I personally think that Wuthering Waves right now, for the first 6 months, in all honesty, Kuro has just focused on what they do best, which is just good gameplay. And I am not complaining. The game has been great in the gameplay department, but I do think in the future that it could be pretty stale if they're not planning to expand it. And sure, right now, in the game, there are clear definitions of what some characters do. But overall, I don't necessarily think that there's been like, a clear definition of a wuwa character. But I think that's personally the best thing about wuwa so far, is that every character in the gameplay aspect in terms of their play styles do feel unique. But like the end goal of their gameplay loops are very similar to each other, which I think they could experiment with a lot more. And I think there's a way to add another gameplay element to make the game even better with what they do best. And I think Kuro just needs time, because their game hasn't even been out for a year yet. And I'm hopeful for the future of the game, obviously, because I play this game and it's my favorite gacha game so far. However, are you gonna call me a tourist if I think the elemental system is shit in Wuthering Waves? Well, in my honest opinion, I do see the simplicity of it and I see the purpose of it, but I wish it could do more, because it feels very empty and not really that full of depth. And if you want to fucking gaslight me into thinking that the wuwa elemental system is amazing in every single possible way, shut the fuck up.
Elements don't matter. Attack style doesn't really matter.
Vars has a pretty good point. Right now in wuwa, it's just about how you can deal your damage. Elements don't really affect it that much, besides if the enemy you're fighting is the same element, that way you'll deal less damage. And the same generally goes for weapon types, but that's actually what I thought Kuro games would heavily lead into with Wuthering Waves. I think there's generally something to be said about how you can make certain weapon types be way more effective in other scenarios, specifically in combat scenarios. They kinda are doing it, but I wish they would heavily lead into it more with how their mechanics work. Gonna use another stagger bar example. What if gauntlets, or any other weapon type that would quote-unquote fit it, has the special attribute of being able to break more of the stagger bar with an intro skill, or with a certain attack, or whatnot. Now, it might be too late to establish something like that, for example, but that doesn't mean they can lead into it in other ways that make sense for the game right now. And you could agree or disagree, and well, you could probably tell, like, it's a decent discussion to have. Like, Wuthering Waves has the depth to basically expand in this way. And that's what Vars has been trying to communicate this entire video. And I'm going to be fair for both sides. I do think Vars fucked up on some points, and he could have phrased his intentions way better, and actually made a very fucking fruitful discussion that I think a lot of people are down to actually sit down and talk about. But Saintontas just has no intention of trying to understand them, because he didn't word it that way, and he just made the problem 10 times worse. And what is he doing now? He paused the video, and now, finally, Saintontas is actually gonna give a proper rebuttal. Just kidding.
Don't matter. Attack style doesn't really matter.
Look, we're just holding on to our fucking intro skill with the fallacy about to go sicko mode.
Vars is actually bringing up some points, and he's like, no, go look at this instead. He doesn't care about the fucking points that he's presenting, and Saint is not willing to go into discussion about how he thinks the game can evolve and do even more. He is too focused on some fucking irrelevant B-roll. Man, I want to fucking get reevaluated for my ASD. The cake is a lie for me. This guy took it, and holy fuck is he eating.
We're just chilling. He sits here on
Your
a full
definition for
concerto bar for
characters in
10
Wuwa.
seconds, and this is the
Elements don't
gameplay
matter.
that he
Attack
wants to
style
put
doesn't really
in.
matter.
Is this really where we're going?
It's just, can you parry and dodge and do your
You don't know how to play the fucking game! And you're making like these critiques on the team building!
The amount of weight he puts into this is actually pretty sad.
rotation properly. At the end of the day, I feel like Wuthering Waves' combat has a ton of depth to it, but not enough width, if that makes sense.
Because you don't know how to play.
He literally just says the game has a lot of depth, but not a lot of wit, which is true. I'm sorry? That's just an objective fact. There's a lot of things you could go really deep into, but that pool of deepness is narrow. But it is really deep. Does that make any sense? It's a cylinder. Knowing how to play is the depth of the game. It goes way deeper for a typical gacha, but the options you have is narrow. Holy fuck.
To collect a bunch of units and plan out a bunch of parties. As stated before, fortunately there are easy fixes to this. For starters, Kuro is already experimenting with party mechanics. one of which being the Dream Link, which came alongside the new event in version 1.4, allowing all 3 units to attack in concert for big DPS and explosions and whatnot. While currently this is only available in the event, they could expand more on this in the future, perhaps give actual significance to the elements that are doing it.
You don't understand what attributes are.
Are you mad that he's saying elements instead of attributes? Because that is correct. This is the correct actually, it's called attributes, and you don't even know what they are. You want to be so technically correct in everything you fucking say. The problem is that everyone in this goddamn fucking world who has a brain cell does not give a fuck about an argument like that. And what's funny is that you get mad about it. If you can get mad at a person using a different word inside a context like this, I don't know what to say.
No, I'm not saying they should become a Genshin clone and make elemental reactions.
I bet that was the last thing Saintontas expected Vars to say in this video.
What I am saying is that they need to add more universal mechanics to encourage the use of different characters and add more layers to team building than just outro skill deepens. That way, maybe there might be a scenario where you want to use Yohu over Shorekeeper or Jinshin over Verena.
1 second, guys. I'm gonna count how many hypercubes he shoots off before swapping to Yinli.
So at the very end of the video, when Vars gets to his point that I was alluding to this entire time, because I watched the video and I, understood what he was saying, he just ignores what Vars has to say and then just goes, guys, look at this B-roll, look at this instead. One of the biggest signs of intellectual dishonesty is ignorance of the evidence, or ignorance of the argument. How fucking ironic, coming from somebody that complains about misrepresentation.
What? Nothing's up. There's no concerto.
This guy cares way too much about things that do not matter.
Attacks like Jozu or Changli and Yinlin
What the fuck was that?
swap canceling for the other very nicely. If they create more engines, that gives players the
What are these fucking he used the word combat engine like 10 times in the fucking video.
Of course you don't understand what he means if you never try to listen to him.
He never defines it. It's almost like this combat engine term is just a vehicle to deliver bullshit to Kuro Games.
A vehicle to deliver bullshit to Kuro Games. That sounds like a really bad intention. Wait, what was it you said earlier again?
Hanlon's fucking razor. A philosophical principle that suggests that people's actions are more likely to be explained by incompetence.
By your own fucking logic, Hanlon's razor is not even an applicable philosophy. So which one fucking is it? Does he have bad intentions or not? All I see is ad hominem and fucking strawman arguments and somebody who gets mad over how they don't represent things with every little fucking detail. You're saying he's shit-talking the devs, indirectly quote-unquote calling them incompetent, and in your own words, said that he has brain dead takes. If you literally use the benefit of the doubt, you would know he's just trying to make a discussion. You're painting the picture, using Hanlon's razor out of all things, and you just don't even back it up properly with how you're reacting to the video. Sorry gamers, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna say the M-verb, and I'm gonna use a hard R. You're a bitpicker.
that gives players the incentive to pull for and build characters.
Gives more engines. That gives players incentive to pull for and build... What? That means nothing.
If you basically agree with Saintontas here, you're either a little bit confused, or you're actually just straight up retarded. Cause essentially what Saintontas says with it means nothing, because it doesn't right now in Wuthering Waves, but it will in the future. So let's use an example of where it has been a problem for years. Right? You have so many fucking characters that do fucking nothing. Oh, look at this neat character that does this very thing that we don't have any mechanic in the game to use it for. Let's create this playstyle and have nothing in the game to use it for. Let's create characters for no fucking reason just because we can. And let's never give them a reason to fucking use them. Because we don't have anything in the game that promotes it, and our endgame content is just focused on dealing the most damage. And let's never expand upon it. Until 4 years later. That is how it can become a problem. Ask yourself this. If you can consistently get 30 stars in TOA every single goddamn time with your characters that you have invested so much time into over 2 years of playing Wuthering Waves in this hypothetical example that I am explaining to you, would you ever really need to pull for a character? In a logical sense, you don't. You never need to pull one, because if TOA is the only game mode, you never need to pull for a character. What is the excitement of getting a new character if you're just gonna do the same thing you've been doing for years? And you can probably tell, I think Vars should have presented this point way more from an endgame perspective, because this is where it's the most applicable. And if you say everything is gonna be completely fine with the way Wuthering Waves is as it stands right now, again, you're literally just the same as the bid pickers. The game is perfect, there's nothing wrong with it. It cannot be improved, it doesn't need to be more, because it's already perfect. Toxic positivity.
Right now, there's no difference between hypercarry and swap cancel teams. It's merely personal preference, but if they make
He's trolling.
personal preference, then there would be a compelling reason to go for those teams.
So currently, right now, ladies and gentlemen, there is absolutely no compelling reason to ever play a single dual DPS team in this game because, let's disregard this fact, the dual DPS teams have the highest actual damage in the game.
And we're back here again. What is the only difference? Playstyle, and the fact that dual DPS teams can outperform a hypercarry team. But which one is easier to play? Hypercarry. But if you're already doing enough damage with a hypercarry team, why the fuck would you need to go dual DPS? And no matter how you see it, Wuthering Waves is a casual game with the ability to go more into detail with the game's mechanics. Then again, Vars is presenting a mostly true point. The only incentive you have for dual DPS is more damage, and if you think it's more fun to play. Otherwise, there is no practical distinction. There aren't any specific incentives in the game besides just doing more damage that incentivizes you to play dual DPS, unless you prefer going dual DPS. Again, more information that is related but irrelevant to the argument.
Wuwa's combat gives off a Sword Art Online sort of vibe, where every character is one class. The combat needs more systems and gameplay elements in place to make it as rich as possible. The mechanics and foundation are there,
Zhongli Yao has a time slow in his kit.
Okay.
That enables dual DPS teams.
Yeah.
Because one of the hardest parts about dual DPS teams
Yeah.
is the fact that those quick swaps
Yeah.
are sometimes hard to actually dodge with.
True.
And that means that you can get a lot of things interrupted when playing those teams. But Zhang Liao's time slow enables dual DPS
True.
because it provides a lot more breathing room
Yeah.
for compositions like that.
Sure, but what if I, like, just do this, and oh, look at that, guys. That's pretty sick, right? I was able to do this because I had enough room for my Changli.
I guess you can say Wuthering Waves has the exact opposite problem as Genshin. The immense
What problem?
Quote unquote, what problem? I genuinely hope that he just doesn't think this at all. I hope this opinion stems from the fact that he's having a fucking fit right now. And not that he thinks that the team building in Wuthering Waves is perfect and cannot be improved any further. And for this next clip, I'm gonna do a comparison. I'm gonna play Vars' clip completely without Saint's reaction, and then I'm gonna play Saint's reaction immediately afterwards.
The immense breadth of Genshin's gameplay, from characters to elemental reactions to combinations and stuff, is held back by the lack of substance in its combat, in that there's nothing to put them to the test. The sheer depth of Wuwa's gameplay, from parrying to dodging to movement to swap cancelling and stuff, is held back by the lack of practical character distinction and systems to complement it. Genshin's very wide but shallow, Wuwa's very deep but narrow. This breadth of Genshin's gameplay, from characters to elemental
Immense breadth. I hold E on Zhong Li and I swap to another character. And this is your immense breadth of gameplay?
reactions to combinations and stuff, is held back by the lack of substance in its combat, in that this
This is literally just a Genshin Impact advertisement. I really don't even know what to...
Tell me how a critique of another game is an advertisement.
is nothing to put them to the test. The sheer depth of Wuwa's gameplay, from parrying to dodging to movement to swap cancelling and stuff, is held back by the lack of practical
This is just wrong. Why are we putting this in the video?
How is it wrong to say that a game that mainly focuses on damage output and how you play the character and how you execute their combos while not having any other combat engine / gameplay elements that distinguishes them playstyle wise, while not having any practical distinction in their end goal of their gameplay loops? Can you delve into that? Or is that like way too hard of a question for you to comprehend?
character distinction and systems to complement it. Genshin's very wide but shallow, Wuwa's very deep but narrow. Long story short, my hope for version 2 is that they expand more on team building and things that make every character feel unique.
And thank you, Vars, for actually bringing a cool discussion for us that people with fucking brain cells can easily follow. And it's kind of funny how he literally does not have a single fucking comment at the end of the video. Quiet as can be, and never ever making a proper counter argument. The only times where he was more in the right is where Vars kinda fucked up. And even so, Vars probably had a really good point, but just fucked up the phrasing. Because everything else Vars said was true about the current state of the game. And I'm way more willing to listen to a guy like Vars than the most childish motherfucker since Enviosity the gacha community has ever fucking seen. You truly are the Kurobot. And not in a good way. And I think Vars definitely deserved a sub for this one. And I'm gonna need Saint to actually fucking do some proper introspection before he goes out to do shit like this again. I will be on his ass. This is bad behavior, and it needs to be called out. I will do my best to let people know when he's being a fucking retard, which he was right now. This is how the video felt like. Kuro Games is like a hot girl at a bar, and Vars is a decent looking guy who's interested. And then there's this hot girl's fat, ugly bitch of a friend that walks in front of him and says, "Nah, she's not interested." You're not, bitch, shut the fuck up. As you can tell, I have been so bad in this entire video, and now I'm just letting it out. But jokes aside, bad behavior needs to be called out, and I will call it out from now, especially from those that I highly respect, or in this case, used to respect. And I just wanted to call it out, and that was all. And cheers for the longest video I've ever made. So I'll see you guys next time when I find something that pisses me the fuck off.